Now, when couples disagree about the degree of closeness and intimacy that they each want in a relationship, it usually, and at least eventually, tends to dominate all aspects of the relationship. So research on attachment has repeatedly shown that there are high levels of dissatisfaction and upset between individuals that have this kind of avoidant attachment style being magnetized to the anxious attachment styles. Now, in their book Attached by Heller and Levine, they also refer to the anxious-avoidant trap as being something that you fall into without very much awareness, and then once you're caught, it's nearly impossible to get out of it. And so let's talk a little bit about 6 signs of what that might be. So the first one is an emotional token economy. So both insecure attachment styles, avoidance, which I'm going to refer to as a rolling stone attachment style, and anxious attachment style, which I'm going to refer to as an open heart attachment style, both are preoccupied with sort of deriving a precarious sense of security through controlling their partner or the external conditions that impact the relationship. And that extends to controlling the thoughts, feelings, and or behaviors of their partners. So for example, anxious partners tend to implement what are called protest behaviors to try to establish or reestablish connection in an insecure relationship. And that might include excessive contact followed by sort of a punitive withdrawal, keeping score in the relationship, or acting hostile. Also various forms of emotional manipulation. Now, for avoidant partners, on the other hand, they tend to exert a sense of control by practicing detachment and using deactivating strategies. Now, this might include verbally expressing an avoidance of commitment, but then acting as if you are committed, or verbally expressing a desire to commit, but then acting uncommitted. They may focus on the flaws in their partner the closer they get to that partner. They might pine for the one that got away to avoid emotional intimacy in the current relationship that they're having. And they may be hyper or hyposexual. Now, both partners implement these strategies in a way that essentially creates tokens of power in the relationship. It's meant to determine who has more emotional control in the economy of the relationship. Now, the second thing is there's a sense of stable instability about the relationship. You know, it may last for a very long time, years even. It might even be a marriage, but there's an element of uncertainty that still persists. So you may be together on the surface of things in name or in label, but the emotional and mental connection just isn't there. So on the other hand, you might have extreme highs and extreme lows that are reinforced by intermittent acts of intimacy. And those are usually followed by a withdrawal or some kind of bout of self-sabotage, which leads me to my third sign, which is pointless fighting. So you might feel that you're constantly fighting about things that you just should not be fighting about at all. The arguments could be centered around something really concrete and seemingly unimportant. But really what it is it's a metaphor for the level of intimacy or the lack thereof between you in the relationship. So for example, there might be an irritance around ignoring the other partner's request for rolling the tube of toothpaste a certain way. And then all of a sudden there's a huge blow up and it turns into this giant argument that is really about feeling as if your partner doesn't have any regard for your feelings whatsoever. Now, the fourth thing is that you may be perceived as the enemy. So if you are the anxious partner, frequently you'll find that the closer you get to your partner, sometimes the worse you're treated. And this is because attachment wounds stem back to an earlier phase of childhood when we tend to see the world as good or bad, law-abiding or law-breaking. Okay, and this is true for both attachment styles. Now, in our partnerships, that kind of emotional reasoning gets stimulated, and then we project that early good-bad way of sorting things onto our partners. So if our partners are nice to us, they are good, and we must be doing good things. If our partners are mean to us, then either they are bad and intend to hurt us, or we did something to deserve it, and we have to find a way to make it right. Now, in the case of the anxious person or the open heart, the more connected that you become to an avoidant partner or a rolling stone, the more they will start to project their own needy parts that they dislike and reject in themselves onto you. But often that stimulates the need to reject it. But they're also still attracted to you, and that's for the same reason, because you cannot fully reject yourself, can you? And usually the struggle is learning how to love yourself, even when you've been taught to reject those parts of yourself. Now, if you are the rolling stone in this relationship, you'll find that the closer you get to your partner, the more that they will rely on you for their happiness and their satisfaction, to stimulate their own sense of goodness, to prove to them their own sense of rightness about themselves, their own deservedness of love. And that starts to feel like a really heavy burden. And that's because their partner really feels more comfortable and secure in a state of merger. Now, this is, to my mind, the paradox of the anxious avoidant trap. So the closer you become, the less you're actually able to see each other for who they really are, as opposed to your own self-projections. So fantasy plays a huge role in this, which we will discuss in a subsequent video. But as a result, when there is friction in the relationship, black and white thinking gets stimulated pretty instantly. And you tend to adopt the opinion that all the goodness that you perceived in your partner might have been a sham, and suddenly they're a malicious enemy intent on hurting you. Then you start fighting below the belt, and you're kind of unable to stop yourself from saying or doing things out of spite that you will later regret. Now, the fifth one is feeling trapped. When you think about it rationally and logically, you know the relationship is not really the healthiest thing for you, but you're too connected, what I'm going to refer to as addicted, to the other person to leave. And so open hearts, people with anxious attachment style, tend to tell themselves, this is the love of my life. If I can't make it work with them, I'll never find any other person that makes me feel this way. And so then they trap themselves into something that they know is not working, okay, because they feel like that's the absolute best they could ever do. Now, avoidant individuals tend to feel trapped by that kind of emotional dependency and what they consider to be high and insatiable expectations of their open-hearted partners. They start to feel like that restricts their freedom. And the last one, number 6, the roller coaster effect. Now, in the relationship, you never feel as if you're on an even keel. Every once in a while, when the rolling stone gives or makes him or herself available to their open-hearted partner, the open-hearted partner's attachment system is sort of temporarily quieted. There's an achievement of that extreme sense of closeness, which is quite literally a high experienced in the same part of the brain as ingestive addictions. So they have this moment of deep intimacy and connection, because oftentimes individuals that have a rolling stone attachment are capable of this. But what happens is it kind of freaks them out, right? So there'll be this moment of connection. The open heart starts to feel this high, like, oh, everything I imagined and fantasized and dreamed about and see how there is potential is possible. And then they're like, ooh, I'm all in. And then that freaks out the rolling stone partner, who's like, whoa, this has now become really overwhelming for me. It feels kind of like a loss of identity, or it starts to feel like, oh, now that my partner's got all these high expectations that I will never, ever possibly be able to live up to, I'm just going to disappoint them, so forth and so on. And that causes the rolling stone to withdraw or implement these deactivating strategies that we talked about. Or they may do something self-sabotaging, which makes the open heart push them away instead. Then, of course, in turn, that activates the open heart's activating strategies. And so up and down we go in this sort of endless cycle and roller coaster. And so knowing what these 6 signs are really intended to help you to understand what the anxious avoidant trap looks like, because that's really a powerful step in putting your relationship and your feeling states into context. It can help you develop insight as well as sort of spaciousness around your internal feeling states and impulses and yearnings, which can sometimes feel so powerful. It's as if we have lost control of ourselves. But here's the thing. Insight can only get you so far. Okay, many individuals that struggle with attachment issues actually have tremendous insight into why they're struggling, in part because they're typically very analytical. And that's because a lot of their energy has shot to their head. Their intellect and their fantasy life really helps them get by in the face of emotionally disappointing or uncomfortable experiences. But all that insight in the world, over time you find it doesn't really help you feel any differently. And you still find yourself caught in these same unhealthy patterns, being attracted to the same unhealthy partners. But if you can shift that in your body, you can start to make more discerning choices in love. And that's because our attachment system is a biological, behavioral, physical, visceral mechanism embedded in the same part of our brains as our active chemical addictions. And so in some, attachment experiences are bodily experiences, and our emotions are embodied as well. So the body is kind of like a warehouse. It stores all the historical, emotional, and psychic energy attached to every intense experience you've ever had. And those experiences carry with them a particular charge. Okay, so every experience you have is translated in your brain into an electrical impulse. And those electrical impulses carve new neural pathways in your brain, in your musculature, and in your organs over time. Body memory, cell memory, muscle memory. So understanding just how addictive the anxious avoidant trap can be on a chemical level, on a visceral chemical level, is useful in framing the healing process as one that is really similar to withdrawal from chemical addiction.